expert speaker, Jo Heath, she's the head of practice and D&I culture and ethics, also known as DICE at Green Park. Jo's a multi-award winning consultancy, so Green Park offers executive search interim management. Jo is an equality law improvement professional and a diversity and inclusion auditor, and has worked in this field for over 20 years. So I'm sure she's very resilient, picking up what Lorraine said. So warm welcome, Jo. So as a D&I consultant, what do you see as the key barriers organizations are facing when trying to engage senior leaders and middle managers in the drive for race equality?
Hi, Jared.
Yeah, hiya, can hear you. Thank you.
Can hear me? Okay. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for having me back second time this week. So I don't want to focus too much on the barriers. We know there's a lot of barriers. I'm going to pick on the 4, what I would call key barriers that we often identify as part of our culture and inclusion audits. So the first one is lack of cultural connectivity, in my opinion. So we see a range of leaders, and some of those display and possess limited levels of cultural intelligence and cultural connectivity with any of those employees that are different to them. And we've spoken a little bit already this week about this fear to engage. Now, this fear has been around for a long time, but I do think it's been heightened since the death of George Floyd and BLM. And due to this existence of a predominant white leadership team for many of our clients, they just don't have the level of exposure to difference that enables them to think outside of their own frame of reference. So they do really struggle to understand those lived experiences. Now, some want to, but just don't know what to do, and some are simply not interested. And I'll move on to that in one of my other questions. I think there's still a real lack of understanding and buy-in of really what goes on at these tiers in an organisation. So the lack of this regular exposure to different cultures, I really think blinkers a leader's understanding and relatability to ethnically diverse talent. So they just don't understand what a daily microaggressive behaviour could mean to an individual. They don't experience the same disproportionality in progression and promotion as others do, both in workplace and society. So, you know, us trying to get those messages and looking at the impact of microaggressions, not giving them a definition, is really what we need to do. The third one is what I would call diversity fatigue, defensiveness, and lack of impact measures. So initiatives often stop at an idea. And actually they're embedded in the organisation, but they get lost interest. And some of the organisations and the leaders that we speak to regularly, they really believe they've invested heavily in the topic of race, and they've put many different initiatives in place, and therefore they get very defensive of the fact that these initiatives are not making the difference that they set out. And rather than focus on the fact that some are not making impact, they are in this defensive space. And so what they really need to do is be prepared to ask themselves, why is this the case? And then be bold enough to stop, start, or change. And the fourth and final one for me, as I said, there are many more, is I really don't think organisations and their leaders have really appreciated the true effect and impact that lack of visible ethno-cultural role models at senior tiers has. So it's also a barrier for middle managers. You know, often this relates to higher attrition and turnover in that middle management community. And this is often linked in our perspective to unfair and biased treatment. And it really starts to affect the aspirations of some of those individuals. I have the opportunity and the pleasure to speak to many ethnic minority mid-managers who tell me they've been in the same role for so many years, despite tirelessly exceeding objectives, meeting objectives, but yet they still find themselves stalling in their career. So when we interview them, they describe to us this cultural fit, which I spoke about earlier in the week, the unwritten rules that just enable an organisation to keep meeting that same leadership profile. And of course, these individuals find it really difficult to break into. And why should they? Of course, this issue is not about the individual, it's about the organisation to remove.
Thank you for sharing. So the organisation, I would say, it's just few organisations where they have engaged with your senior middle manager, have engaged with this topic. What difference have you seen happen there?
Yes, I'm going to bring to life one quick case study, which is our work with an international FTSE 100 home improvement company. Now, we've worked with them for a long period of time, and we've worked with their 500 top leaders. So that's board, C-suite, directors, area managers. And they've all gone through our cultural connectivity and inclusive leadership program. Now, for many of those, it was their very first experience of any type of training of this sort. Despite them actually managing a really high percentage of ethnically diverse employees, they really didn't have very strong understanding of the experiences of these diverse groups, and definitely didn't understand the historical context of race or the impact of microaggressions. So, since they've gone through the training, I believe we've seen a real marked effect on the behaviours, a culture that's now empowering individuals to call out and challenge issues and be much more bolder about zero tolerance. Now, as you would expect, this has resulted in a higher level of grievances, perhaps less engagement. And whilst a leader and a manager could see that as a real negative, this organisation has embraced that as actually, this is powerful. It means that people are comfortable to finally speak up when many people felt that before. Now, on this particular programme, I had an individual, a mid-manager who was of Indian heritage. And after coming off the programme, she felt really empowered returning back to work, and acknowledged the fact that there was a supplier that she used to work with regularly who was constantly making microaggressive and racist comments to her. And this had been going on for years. And on this particular day after the training, she decided enough was enough. And she challenged this supplier on the phone when they had their next call. She then decided to escalate this to her senior manager and explain what had been happening for so long. It was then escalated to this SLT, and all agreed this was not the behaviours that they wanted to stand for, and they felt comfortable now to challenge it. It was fully backed up by all the SLT, and they chose to send a letter to the supplier to say they were terminating the relationship with immediate effect because of their racist behaviours. Now, this was a long-standing relationship. It was a significant spend supplier, and it really started to show support for that individual, but made a significant stand that was picked up positively by the whole organisation.
And we've heard a number of organisations where this culture change and actually supporting your staff or dealing with it, whether it's external suppliers or internally, it shows we really do care about this and we want to hear your voice, you've been listened to, and that's quite rare, but it's having a huge impact on all staff saying, there's hope here. So in your final minute, Joe, what tip would you give organisations that are struggling to engage senior leaders and middle managers in the drive for race equality?
Okay, two quick things. So I think this is all about influence, and we help organisations and their leaders to think about the business case for D&I, and we've got all the data, the McKinsey and all that, but that doesn't really work for me. We need to talk about this, in my opinion, in a number of lenses. So we talk about the social and moral lens, so it's just the right thing to do, and sadly you could argue this is the only lens that we should be applying. Actually, we're in a multicultural country, so we just need to make sure that we don't see these disproportionate experiences. But obviously, if it was the only lens, we wouldn't see underrepresentation and negative experiences. So sometimes, for me, unapologetically, we need to consider the other lenses that will hook people in. Now, this could be the commercial case for change, it could be winning the war for talent, it could be the ability to attract diverse customer markets. And at the end of the day, leaders and managers will have different motivating factors. And that's something who works with, someone who works with their heart found quite difficult. But actually, if we work on getting their attention on something that resonates with them, we can then introduce the other lenses to get that balanced buy-in. And I'm going to finalise by a really quick analogy, which is a bit random, but it's about passengers on a bus. And for me, this is how I describe the role of influencing. So we can all sit on the bus. We can attempt to go in the same direction and apparently on the same journey. And some of the leaders may be at the back of that bus. And I'll describe those as the D&I skeptics or the defensive passengers. Others are in the middle, and I'd describe those as the D&I unsure. And then you've got those at the front, and they're the bought-in and the curious passengers. Organisations, and Raj alluded to this in the opening, for me, should focus their attention on those middle passengers. if nothing else, to preserve their emotional energy, but also to get the greatest tangible output. And attempting to influence and engage those sitting right at the back in D&I and race equality can actually be emotionally draining and time consuming, especially if your organisation is struggling with capacity. Therefore, it is important to, you know, if you really want to make that tangible change and move that dial faster, to focus on the middle. That middle are the managers that have the will but not the skill, but they can be upskilled. And if they then can further support the front passengers, and they're the ones with the skill and the will, collectively they can advocate it across the whole organisation, making those at the back want to enjoy the ride.